So what we are doing is we are continuing on in this sermon series that we've been on. We've got this week and next week left of talking about really looking at who Jesus is. This is the question that we've been trying to answer. And so it's based off this reality that every one of us could probably finish this sentence in a different way, right? Jesus is blank. Some of us might say Jesus is really cool. Maybe somebody who lived close to Jesus would say Jesus is smelly. I don't know. It's possible, right? Maybe somebody who likes Jesus is going to be like, Jesus is awesome. Jesus is great. Somebody else might say Jesus is a fraud. Jesus is all these different things. And so every one of us has an opinion, and that's what I want to point out in this series, is that everybody has an opinion on who Jesus is and who he is not. And so what we are doing in this series is we're diving into what those around him said. Who did they say he was? We've dived into, and we'll continue diving into some today, what did Jesus say that he was, and what did everybody around him think? Today, we're going to be specifically looking at a slightly broader picture, not just what Jesus said, but what people around him all over the place said. As a matter of fact, today we're even going to look at why did Jesus die? Because it was ultimately about what they said about Jesus. This is why they killed the man as well. So we're going to press into that. And the reason we're pressing into that is because, quite honestly, today is Palm Sunday. Now, I don't know if you guys know what Palm Sunday is or not, but all over the world, the Sunday before Easter Sunday, which is today, what churches tend to celebrate is they celebrate the moment that Jesus walked into Jerusalem a week before Passover, basically. And so what they did is they took these palm branches and they waved all around. I'm actually going to read it from the Bible so you get the story better than I can tell you it. But what happens is Jesus is on his way there, and the news that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem spread to absolutely everybody, right? And so this whole crowd of followers of Passovers that are coming to Israel to celebrate Passover. Imagine Christmas and like the traffic on the road at Christmas. You get all these people coming to Lincoln to be with their family or leaving Lincoln, whatever the case is, right? There's all these people coming to Jerusalem because the difference between Christmas and this is everybody in the city had to go to Jerusalem. Every Israelite had to go to Jerusalem on Passover. So they're there, they hear about Jesus, and they take these palm branches and they wave them. They throw them on the road to meet him, and they shout, "Praise God, blessing on the one who comes in the name of the Lord." And this is what I really want to focus on today. Hail to the King of Israel. Who did they say that Jesus was? See, today is the day that the entire church worldwide celebrates the fact that Jesus is King. This is what is celebrated. Now, I want to take a moment and just simply pause. So Jesus is King. I didn't come up with what I was going to talk about today. I didn't even necessarily like what I was going to talk about today per se. I don't dislike it, right? But this was not something I chose, but rather I'm doing this because of the day, right? But the thing is, yesterday I was driving around the city, and I don't know if you guys were driving around the city at all yesterday, but there's like signs everywhere that say, "No king, no king, no king." And I just want to be clear. I'm not being political in what I'm stating in any way, shape, or form. Nothing that I say today is political. As we're going to see, is that I think Jesus actually turns everything on its head. That's what I want us to talk about today, is that Jesus turns everything on its head. This is what we need to understand. So when I say Jesus is king, I mean nothing to do with Democrats or Republicans or liking Trump or not liking Trump. That's got nothing to do with anything. I'm talking about monarchy, yes. I'm talking about royalty, yes. But I'm not talking about anything current per se. Because here's the thing. I think all of us have some degree of familiarity or an idea of what it means. When I say Jesus is king, we all have this notion in our head of what that means. And I know, looking at the city today, that half the city thinks kings are bad one way or another. Half the city doesn't care. The other half of the city, because clearly there's three halves, are all for kings, right? And so I don't know where we're at today, and I don't care where we're at today. I don't. I do want to point one thing out, though. What I realize when I'm speaking this sermon is that there's a lot of division in this city. There's a lot of division in our nation. And there's a lot of healing that needs to happen because a lot of people are really angry. So whether we agree with people or not, whether we are on this side or this side doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of hurt and there's a lot of people that are upset, and Jesus doesn't like that. That's what I want to point out today, is Jesus doesn't like anger and hurt and all this. Now, here's the thing. I love the fact that we are in a country where people can hold signs and say no kings. I love the fact that we are in a country where people can actually proclaim their thoughts. I've lived in countries where that's not allowed. I grew up in Bucharest, Romania, and I remember walking down the main street in Bucharest, Romania. They literally, they refused to fix the bullet holes in the walls because they want the bullet holes to be permanently in the walls, reminding people of how bad it was in their country under communism. When there was a dictator, they had what they call Tiananmen Square 2, quite literally happened. There were protesters out in the University Plaza in Bucharest, Romania, and they had tanks, just like in China was more famous, but they had tanks come, they had machine guns come, and completely annihilate the protesters. So what I want to say is I praise God that we live in a country, no matter what the political spectrum we're in, we still live in a country where people can do that and go home safely. And that's a good thing. And so I just want to praise God for that. And I want to state that this is where we're at, and there's good in it, even in it, right? That's what I want to state. Jesus is king. What does it mean to be king? That's what we're looking at. What does it how does he define that statement? Because Jesus doesn't say this. Everybody says this about Jesus. What does it mean to be king? Now, here's the thing. I know that some of us have some experience with monarchy. Some of us have more, some of us have less. I personally, obviously, have gotten around the world a little bit. I've lived in a country with a dictator. I've been there. I've seen that. I've been to Buckingham Palace, and I've seen it. I've been to the King of Spain's house. I've been to many, many different king people's houses, right? But I've never actually seen a king that has the full power that normally we think of when we think of king, because that really doesn't exist in the world anymore. The only experience I honestly have with royalty is a game that I played as a kid. And I'm guessing that most of us have the same exact experience, at least if you grew up in the 80s or around then or somewhere near there, I don't know. But for me, King of the Hill was the coolest game on the planet. And I think it probably describes royalty better than anything else if you've ever played King of the Hill. Now, again, because I grew up in the 80s, here's how we played King of the Hill. I'm on the hill. If you try to get me, I slap you in the face, push you down, your nose bleeds, your skins are bleeding. It's cool, it's fine, it's the 80s, nobody cares. That's where I grew up, right? That's how it was. And I loved the game. Why? Because I loved the bloody ankles. I loved the bloody nose. I loved getting them. I don't know why. I'm a masochist, apparently. I loved giving them. I loved the fight, the anger, the push. But it was really the thrill, right? Because what I loved about the game most was that when I'm on the hill, I have no guarantee of staying on the hill, right? Because I may be up here and I'm celebrating my victory. Yes, I'm king of the hill. But there's somebody behind me when I'm celebrating and they're ready to like, and then comes the tumble, then comes the roll, and my life as royalty ends in bloody mess. That's kind of where it is, right? It's just I fall down. I loved the game because of the temperamental nature of the whole thing. Because of the fight, because of the struggle. Here's what I know about being king of the hill is that you're never going to be king of the hill very long before somebody else wants to push you down. And I know this because I've seen in Buckingham Palace, I've also seen where they used to hang the kings that they didn't like, right? Like monarchy, you didn't live long because you were shot in the head. That's what happened. So being a king is a good thing until you're shot in the head, or until your head is on a pole, or until something really nasty, disgusting, basically like that happens. The point is, you're good while you're on the hill, but when you fall down, everything falls down. And so here's why I bring this up today, is that I think so many of us we don't play the game of King of the Hill on an actual hill anymore because we grew up, right? But I don't think we ever stopped playing the game. I don't. How many of us try to be the king in our own situations? Let me rephrase that question. How many of you like winning? How many of you like losing? Nobody puts it. That's crazy, right? How many of us like winning? Well, that's the game of the King of the Hill. We like being on top. We like it when we win. We like it when other people lose. And that's not polite to say, but I love it when people lose because that means I win, right? And my wife is different than me. She loves everybody. She's nice. She's kind. She wants other people to win too. Why can't we all be winners? And I'm like, shut up, I won. This is where I'm at. But I mean, this is just that I think many of us, we love winning. Some of us love it so much we want everybody to win. Some of us love it so much we don't want anybody else but me to win. But we all play this game. Maybe it looks different, again, with my kids. I got them to bed on time. King of the Hill, right? I got them to eat their dinner. I win. It's a fight. It's a gamble. It's like this. Sometimes there's an actual play King of the Hill on the bed with them, right? Push them off, win. There's nobody knows this. I'm a good dad. But at the same time, like we still do this. Maybe it's at work, right? I got more sales than you did. I did better. The boss likes me more. I'm getting promoted. You're not. You fill in the blank. Whatever job you have, we still like winning, and we like it when other people lose, right? Because that's who we are. Let's talk about at school. You like getting an A. Maybe it doesn't matter whether other people get B's and C's and D's, but you got an A, so you're happy. Let's talk about a soccer team, right? I mean, they're out there playing right now. There's a winning team and a losing team. Some of them will feel good, some of them won't. And so we all like winning, and we do whatever we have to in this world many times to win because we want to stay on top of the hill. And so what we want to talk about is when Jesus is king, everybody had this mindset of what they saw in Jesus and why they're saying this. They literally had this vision, palm branches, we're praising him because he's going to conquer Rome. They had this picture of who Jesus was. But what we need to understand about Jesus is that there's a lot of blanks and actually understanding a lot. Because Jesus tends to turn everything that we see as right and turn it upside down and say, this is actually right. This is what we believe the way the world should work. And Jesus says, okay, that's good and nice and everything, but let's look at it like this. That's what Jesus does. And he's so good at doing that. And he shows us things that we would have never seen when we truly listen to what's going on. So today, here's what we're going to do. We're going to dive into the story of Jesus, the story of Jesus specifically in his very last week, where we fast forwarded away from basically we're going all the way from Palm Sunday to Good Friday is really where we're jumping into right now. I want to take us into the story as Jesus is on trial. Jesus is on trial very specifically because the Jewish leaders hated Jesus for what he said. They did. But the rulers of the city hated Jesus for a different reason. Herod, who was king of the Jews, hated Jesus because kings don't like it when other people say they're a king. That's just the way it works. And the problem was in Israel, there was multiple levels of leadership. There was the Jewish synagogue, which was the pastors, the priests, all of that. They actually held political power in Jerusalem. So they ruled here. You had the king of Israel who ruled here. And then above all of that, you had Pilate, who was the Roman emperor's subsidiary governor, if you will, of Jerusalem. So you have all of these people, the Jewish leaders and the King Herod here, but Pilate is over all of them. So as we're diving into the story here, he's already gone to trial with the Jewish leaders. They said he blasphemed against God. He's a liar. He's not it. We're going to kill him. He went to Herod already. Herod said, like, what's your deal, dude? Are you a king or are you not? And Jesus didn't really answer Herod. So he sends him off to Pilate. And Pilate is going to ask the same question that everybody else is asking. Here it is. Pilate goes back into his headquarters and calls for Jesus to be brought out. Are you the king of the Jews? This is the question. And this is the question that matters. Pilate is asking this because, again, this is why Jesus was killed. The Jewish people had their issues with Jesus, but the reason that he was crucified on a Roman execution torture chamber of a cross, the reason Jesus was crucified was because that was a Roman execution method, and the Romans did it to him because of this question. It had nothing to do with what he believed, what he taught, with anything else. He was killed because he was called a king. This is what it was. Are you the king of the Jews? He asks. And Jesus looks at him, and I love this answer. He says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is not of this world. See, what I'm sharing is, this is what everybody believed about Jesus. They looked at this man. They saw him ride in with this triumphant entry like he's going to conquer Rome, because that's what they thought. Everybody in the entire city, it's like if the Huskers had won that game and came home, how happy would we be, right? How happy would we be if we had finally conquered everybody in March Madness? Not finally, we've never been there before, but it was awesome, right? For the short-lived moment that it was there. How awesome would it be if we actually came home with the trophy again? Like, how celebrated. This is how Jesus came in. with the crowds yelling, Hosanna, Hosanna, he's the king, he's the king. And now Pilate stands and looks at him and says, dude, are you the king? And his answer is not no. I want to be very clear. Jesus never says, I am not a king, because he is a king. Jesus never denies it, which would have been so simple. Had he just said, no, I'm not a king, they wouldn't have killed him. It would have been that simple. He could have saved himself from death by simply saying no. But he didn't do that. He said, my kingdom is different than what you're thinking. You've got it all wrong, buddy. That's what he says. He says, you say that I'm a king, for I have this purpose and I was born for this purpose. I've come into this very world to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. So in essence, what he's saying is, I may be a king, but I'm not the king you think. I'm a king of truth. I'm a king of life. I'm a king of so much other stuff, right? But not the way you think. And here's what he says, I'm a king to those who listen to my voice. I'm a king to those who listen to my voice, but I'm not a king to those who don't listen to my voice. Now, even if you think about that sentence, just think about it for a second. That makes no sense, right? Like, kings rule by power, right? That's how kings rule. Kings rule by, if you don't listen to me, I send an armed guard and they beat you up till you're down at the bottom of the hill, right? Kings rule by pushing people. This is what they do. But Jesus says, I rule by talking, by just simply saying, this is truth. And if you care about truth, you draw in. If you don't care about truth, you push away. So what he's saying is, this is what it looks like to be king. Jesus is a king, but it looks radically different than what they thought. And here's the thing, everybody thought they were in charge. But what I love Jesus is doing this whole time, and he shows no sign of fear. He doesn't say, no, I'm not a king. He shows no sign of like intimidation in front of the most powerful man in the nation. He shows no intimidation. He says, dude, you got it all wrong. And it takes a lot of guts to stand before, I mean, for me, if I was standing in front of the mayor of Lincoln, she's not even that powerful, right? But like, girl, you don't know what you're doing and you got it all wrong. I think I would phrase it better, right? But he goes before him and the Pilate, and he says, my kingdom doesn't look anything like what you think. He gets in his face and basically says, no, you've got it all wrong. Those who listen to me know. Those who listen to me hear me. See, Jesus is playing a game of king of the hill, but he's on a totally different hill than everybody else. And that's what we need to understand, that the kingdom looks different. We're playing over here on a hill, but he's on a mountain over there, and it's totally different, and we're not playing the same game. So what Jesus is saying is, leadership in my kingdom looks different than you think leadership should look. Leadership in my kingdom is completely different. So Jesus actually, even when he says, those who hear my voice, what he's actually doing is he said that phrase before, and what I want to dive into is the way that Jesus defined leadership. The way that Jesus looked at what does it look like to be on top of the hill? What does it look like to be in that place? And as my mind was going there, I immediately jumped to the story. In Luke chapter 14 is where it's found. We'll jump there in a bit. But you don't have to put the verse up yet. I jumped to the story where, in essence, what's happening here is there's a wedding feast. And I don't know if you've ever been to a wedding, if you've ever been to a wedding feast, the celebration after the wedding, but at every wedding feast I've ever been to, there's always this head table in the front of the room, right? That's where the bride and the groom sit, and then next to them, the groomsmen, the bridesmaids, all that. They get the big prime seat at this table right here. Everybody else walks in, and you either have assigned seats or you just go pick a place, right? So what Jesus tells the story is like, imagine one day you're going to a wedding celebration, a feast after the wedding, and you walk in the room and you just go straight up to the head table and you're sitting right next to the bride. And she's not there yet, but you're just sitting there. Imagine the audacity of that, the stupidity of that, right? And Jesus is like, okay, well, so if you're that stupid and you go sit in this prime position spot right here, what do you think's going to happen when the groom walks in? Like, yeah, you can have my seat. No big deal, man. It's all right. You sit by the bride. I'm cool. Yeah, heck no. The groom's going to walk in. He's like, dude, you're in my seat. You get out of there. I got this nice spot over there in the back of the corner with a dunce cap. You go take that one, right? I'm sitting next to the girl who's the prettiest in the room. She's mine. I'm going to sit next to her. So in the story, what Jesus says is the audacity that you would have to take the best place when it doesn't belong to you is the way that the world sees kingdoms functioning. Is that kings always go to the top of the mountain. But what Jesus says is, no, my kingdom looks different. In my kingdom, kings are not the ones who go to the top. Kings are the ones who go somewhere else. Here's what he says. He says, instead of going to the head table, what you should do is you should take the lowest place at the foot of the table. Like, go to the worst table. You go find the dunce cap. Go sit in the corner. You go sit there. You take the spot there. Then when the groom comes in and sees you in the worst seat at the house, he's going to be like, dude, you don't belong there. Come sit with us at the head table. Come here. We'll pull up a chair. You need a better seat than that. What Jesus is saying is we need to trust each other. We need to love into that. We need to press into that. This is what Jesus very, very clearly is saying. Luke 14, verse 11, those who exalt themselves will be humbled. Those who humble themselves will be exalted. What he's saying is that when we put ourselves on top of the mountain, there's always somebody to push us down. But when we go to the bottom of the mountain, we just wait for the game to be over. Maybe we can come up to the top. What Jesus is saying is my kingdom looks different than what you think the kingdom should possibly look like. What he's saying is we do things differently. Now, Jesus was a king. When he comes in on Palm Sunday, they're shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David, right? This is what they're shouting. Who is David? Do you guys know, if you know the history of Israel, there's so many moments in Israel where everything seems absolutely different, right? King Saul was ruling over the nation, and he was doing his thing, living on top of the mountain and showing everybody his power, his greatness, his goodness, all this, and God gets ticked off at Saul. He says, you're so obsessed with yourself that you're not putting God first, is basically what God says to him. And he says, so I'm going to go find somebody better. So he goes to a field and he finds a shepherd who's serving sheep who smell and are out there in the middle of nowhere. He finds the most blue-collar job. Literally, this was the worst job in Israel. It was. People spited shepherds in Israel because they were smelly, stinky. They lived outside. It wasn't a good job. And yet, in Israel, shepherds are everywhere. God goes to the shepherd and he says, I'm going to take David and make this shepherd guy the king. I'm going to lift him up. Because see, if you study the history of Israel, this happens more than just simply one time. Honestly, in Israel, beyond just simply the shepherd moment there, we also see Moses. If you know the story of Moses, who was Moses? He was the son of Pharaoh in Egypt. But he gets kicked out. He's on a murder charge. He runs away. So what does he end up doing? He takes care of sheep for his father-in-law. See, Moses, the greatest leader of Israel, was a shepherd. David, the greatest leader of Israel, was a shepherd. There's this theme that if you want to be good, you go take care of smelly animals. Nebraska's got it covered, right? I mean, we've got a lot of smelly, no, not in Lincoln specifically, but there's a lot of cows here, right? I mean, this is who they were. This is what they were. So Jesus, in John chapter 10, says quite simply that, you know what? This is what kingdom looks like to me. And he tells him this story in John chapter 10, where he says, I tell you the truth. Anybody who sneaks over the wall of a sheepfold rather than going through the gate must surely be a thief and a robber. But the one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep recognize his voice. See, the reason I'm bringing this up right now is because what did he say when he's standing in front of Pilate? He said, I am a king. I speak truth. And those who care about truth hear my voice and are drawn near to me. Those who hear my voice are drawn near. This is the exact same thing he's saying here. I believe he's quite possibly he's making a reference to his previous statement. And what he's saying here is, those who hear my voice, come. Those who hear the sheep, who hear the shepherd, come. He calls his own sheep by his name, and he leads them out. This is what he says. After he's gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow them because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger, but they run from him because they know his voice. And so, okay, I'm going to give you the context now of John chapter 10 that we're talking about here. Jesus is speaking in John chapter 10, and so we're no longer in Passover week. We're no longer there. I want to dive into, really, this is like 8 chapters before. It's about 3 months prior is when Jesus gives this speech on Jesus is a shepherd. This is what he's saying. I'm a shepherd. And I, like David, like Moses, like so many before me, am a shepherd. This is how I'm going to come. The reason he does this specifically, though, is because it's taking place in John 10, takes place on the Hanukkah celebration. Now, we've all heard of Hanukkah. We've seen the lights. We've seen the menorahs. We've seen all that. Maybe we've even heard Adam Sandler's really cool song about it. But what Hanukkah was all about was not gifts and presents and 12 days and all this. What Hanukkah was actually about, it was about the celebration, really, of their liberation from a foreign oppressor. But one of the things that they did during the Hanukkah celebration is they specifically read passages about the kings of Israel. So again, there's a direct correlation here. I know this is a little bit of a heady message here, but there's correlations everywhere. What Jesus is talking about in John chapter 10 is everybody else was discussing. Hanukkah is about the good and bad rulers of Israel. In Ezekiel, I'm jumping around. Sorry. You'll stay with me because you're awesome. But jump down a couple slides. In Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 2, here's what Jesus says. He says, woe to the shepherd. Jesus didn't say this. This is what God says. And the reason I'm quoting this is because this is what everybody listening to Jesus had just recited at breakfast, right? So they leave the Hanukkah breakfast in the morning, reading this passage, and then Jesus comes and gives them John chapter 10. So here's what they had just said is, woe to the shepherds of Israel, a.k.a. the kings of Israel, who only took care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You drink the milk, wear the wool, and butcher the best animals, but you let your flock starve. Everybody else was celebrating or talking about the bad shepherds and what good leadership was. Again, the point that I'm trying to get across is Jesus is saying this to a people, talking about what does royalty should it look like? What does a leader look like? And again, even if we don't understand royalty or leadership on that level, what does it look like to be a good dad? What does it look like to be a good mom? What does it look like to take care of those under us? What does it look like to be a good employer? What does it look like to be on a team or a coach or a captain? What does it look like to be in any position where you're dealing with friends, right? What he's saying is, what does it look like to lead others in any capacity? And what he says is, this is what it looks like. We are called to be shepherds like Jesus. We are called to do this. So, what is a shepherd? What does a shepherd do? I'm going to give us 3 principles, really, that I believe God says, if you're going to be a king, if you're going to lead others, if you're going to be in a position of authority of any flavor, this is what it looks like to be a good shepherd. First of all, he says, a shepherd is a gatekeeper. This is the first one. When Jesus is talking about shepherds, here's what he says. He says, yes, I am a gate. Jesus is a gate. That's not a great motto. But this is what he says. I am a gate. In John 10, verse 9 through 10, he says, those who come in through me will be saved. Those who come in go freely and will find good pastures. The thief's purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy. But my purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. I'm a gate. What the heck does that mean? If you're confused, so were they. Jesus kind of breaks it down, and this is what he's doing here. He's saying is, a shepherd, literally in Israel, they would have these pens. Sometimes they're made of wood. Sometimes they're like in their home corral, right? They'd have this pen with one gate. Not much different than how we take care of animals now. Sometimes, though, shepherds would actually be out and about with the sheep, and nighttime falls, and so they have to find a place to put the sheep. Do you know where they would go? They would go to a cave or an outcropping on a cliff or something, and they'd put the sheep in here where there's only one entrance in and out. So whether it was a homemade enclosure or a rock enclosure, there's one entrance in and out. And what the shepherd would do is he would literally lay in the enclosure. Why is he laying in the enclosure? Because for a sheep to leave, they got to climb over his belly, and you better believe that's going to wake you up, right? But not only for a sheep to leave, this would happen. For a lion to come in, it has to go over his belly as well. And so what he's saying is the shepherd takes care of the sheep. The shepherd literally lies on the ground to protect the sheep from the evil that will come. The shepherd literally pushes his life here to do this. And he is the one that leads them to green pastures. Psalms 23. Like he's leading me to by the valley of the shadow of death into the green pastures, the still, calm waters. This is what the good shepherd does. And he says, my job is to lead people to what's healthy and to block what's unhealthy, to lead people to what brings life and to tell you that this will kill you. And I'm going to stand in the line in the middle and say, I'm not going to let the hurt come in. I'm going to stop it. This is what he does. This is a shepherd, is a gatekeeper. But then he goes on and he says, I am the good shepherd as well. He goes on to say, the good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. Again, you're laying there to protect them. Then he makes a contrast, and this is why this matters. He's saying, this is what a good shepherd looks like. But all the other people that we might want to follow, all the other people who claim to be like good leaders, all the other people, and maybe you can think of a boss that this applies to. I'm just saying, maybe you can think of a teacher or a bad coach in school that like this could apply to. Maybe we can think of so many different people where this could apply. What he says is a hired hand will run when he sees the wolf coming. He will abandon the sheep because they don't belong to him, and he isn't their shepherd. And so the wolf attacks them and they scatter the flock. And the hired hand runs away because he's working only for the money and doesn't really care about the sheep. What's the difference between a TikTok pastor and a pastor right here? One is out for likes and follows, and so he doesn't mind taking you off. What's the difference between one who is only pushing to get his wealth up and one who is here saying, I care about you, I want to go out to coffee with you, and I want to build relationship with you? It's the difference is that what Jesus is saying is if any leader, whether it be a pastor, whether it be a teacher, whether it be a mom, whether it be a dad, whether it be a boss, whether it be anybody, is they're in it for the money and they're in it for themselves, don't follow them. They're not right. But what he's saying is any person who's in it for the sheep is the one that you should follow. Like this is what they have to care about the sheep. They have to care about the other people more than themselves. But the thing is, when we think of the game of King of the Hill, right, that's not how the game works. Because I'm on top because I pushed everybody else down. I'm on top because I made them bow down, whatever, right? But Jesus is saying, my kingdom looks different. A shepherd is meant to be good. A shepherd is meant to be kind. This entire passage, literally what he's answering in John 10 is this is what a good king looks like. This is what it looks like. Because he's, again, referencing their Israelite kings. That's what he's making reference to. I'm the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and they know me, just as my Father knows me, and I know the Father. So I sacrifice my life for the sheep. I sacrifice my life for the sheep. Why is Jesus a king? It's not because he conquered Rome. It's because when Pilate looked at him and said, are you a king? He didn't say no. Instead, he said, I'm a totally different type of king. And when he hung on that cross and they put that sign above him that says, the King of the Jews, which is what hung above him on the cross, this is why he was killed. And yet he says, yes, I am, but it's not what you think. Killing me won't work. Because my kingdom doesn't look like your kingdom. See, Jesus is willing to go anywhere, do anything to reach his sheep. He is literally lying at the gate saying, the evil has to come through me. This is why he laid down his life. The evil has to come through me before it can get to my people. I will block the evil from getting to my people. This is what he is saying. Jesus is a shepherd. He is a good shepherd, but he is also an unwavering shepherd. See, there's no length he would not go to bring us home, to say, come to me, to come back to me. See, in verse 16 of the very same chapter, he says, I got other sheep too. You're not the only sheep. Thanks for being at church this Sunday. That's awesome. But there's more out there, is what he says. I have other sheep that are not in this pen, and I got to bring them also so that they can listen to my voice, so that they can hear my voice, so that they can draw near. And then there'll be one flock and one shepherd, and I will be leading them, and I will be calling them, and I will be bringing them together. There's others out there. Now, the reason we've got these cards is because there's others out there. I want to state also, I'm not ignorant to this. There should be one flock and one shepherd. I know there's a heck of a lot of churches in this city. And you know what? I think there needs to be more unity. I'm actually literally, like next month, I'm planning an outreach, a block party I'm going to do in collaboration with a church that is radically different than us. But I'm intentionally going to a church that is radically different than us because I'm going to say, you know what? We can partner with people who are... Well, they're much older than us because they're not 2 months old, right? And so, I mean, they're much different than us on so many different realms. And it's going to push them, and it's going to push us, and it's going to be exciting and good because we're trying to bring unity in places where there aren't unity. This is what we're going to try and do. And by the way, I'm also going to invite like every other church in this area. Invite that one and others. Like, we're going to meet at Cooper Park and plan a party together. Do you want to come join us? We're going to plan a party together. And so that's going to happen next month. We're putting things in a process. But the reason we're doing this is because we believe that if we're listening to his voice, we're going to be drawn in together. And if we're listening to his voice, it's not going to be about us and building our kingdom. It's about him and just simply letting others hear his voice. That's what we believe more than anything else. That's why we do the 3-week challenge. If you don't like this church, let me tell you about another one because there's plenty of good ones. Right? If you don't like this one, let's talk and give us 3 weeks. And if it doesn't work out, you know what? That's great. I'll point you to another church that I think might do good for you. In Luke, we see Jesus say, you know what? He would search for the lost sheep. And Luke, he gives a whole nother story about a whole nother shepherd. And he says, you know what? If I have these sheep and like one wanders away, I'm going to leave the 99 and I'm going to go out there. There's no mountain I won't climb up, no hill I won't go, right? I could sing about it if I wanted to. But he says, I will go anywhere. I will go anywhere to bring you home. I care deeply about the lost. I care deeply about those who are out there. I care deeply about the prodigal son. I care deeply about all of this. So deeply, in fact, that I would lay down my life. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life. No one takes it from me. And I love that line. Nobody takes it from me. Because he stands before Pilate. And Pilate says, just deny that you're a king and you're saved, right? Just say no and you go home and everything's good. That's literally all he had to do was say, no, I'm not a king. And no, he wasn't a royal king. But instead of saying no, he says, it's not like you think. No one takes my life from me. I have the authority to lay it down. But the good news is I have the authority to take it back up again. We have a king that lives in a different kingdom. We think death is final. We think darkness is all there is. We think hurt and pain are where we have to live. But we live in a kingdom where our king said, shut up to the grave. Our king said, get behind me, Satan, to death, to loss, to pain. And he literally stepped on its head and said no more. Where there was darkness, there will be life. Where there was hurt, there will be joy. Where there was pain, there will be nothing but joy. I come that you may have life and have it to the full. Why? Because I am the way and the truth and the life. And we preach on that like every week this month. But I am the way and the truth and the life is what he's saying. I'm the gate. Come in through me. Come in here. And you don't have to face this. I've conquered it for you. Are you willing to press into what I've done? See, the question that stands before us today is, everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Are we willing to hear his voice today? That's the question. Are we willing to hear his voice? And worship him, you can come back up if you want, because we always hear God better with piano. That's just my opinion anyway. But are we willing to hear God's voice today? And if we are, what the heck is it trying to say to us? What does God want to say right now, in this moment, in this place, at this time? What does God have to say to us? How many of us have been playing King of the Hill for a really long time? I just want to start there. Maybe you're the one pushing people down. Maybe you feel like everybody else has just been pushing you down. Like you get one step up and you're just pushed right back down. Every time, one step up, you're pushed back down. Every time you make a step, you think you're going to get there. You think you're breaking the addiction. You think you're breaking the hurt. You're breaking through the anxiety. You're breaking through all of this. You get pushed one step back down. The game of King of the Hill sucks. What if we didn't have to play it anymore? What if we could turn it on its head? What if we could lean into a God who says we're playing the wrong game? And it's not about that at all. It's not about do we have a king or no king or yes a king or what king? Where do we go? It's not about that. We're playing the wrong game. That's not the point. The point is, listen to my voice. Where am I leading you right now? I'm the gate. If you want life, if you want hope, if you want all of this, come to me. If you're tired of the game, if you're tired of the sin that has railed in your life over and over again, come to me. Believe that I am literally standing at the gate and saying there's nothing I wouldn't do for you. If you're tired of the addiction, I am here and I want to cut it off. If you're tired of the pain, I'm here and you're like, cut it off. And I'm not saying like we come to Jesus and everything like, shut up. He's not a genie in the bottle. But I'm saying that when we relinquish control, the fight's no longer ours. When we say, I'm a son of God and God has already handled this, it changes how we fight. It's not up to me. It's not up to behavior modification. It's not up to changing my habits, my skills, my life, my this. It's now on somebody greater than me. Jesus, we need you. Jesus, be my king. Because that's the king I want to follow. The king that loves me when I mess up. The king that picks me up. He sees me on the bottom of the hill and he said, come on up, bud. There's more light up here than down there. Jesus is a shepherd king. My question today is, when do we need to listen? Is there sin in our life that we've been struggling with and we need to let go of? Do we just need to seek forgiveness? Like say, Jesus, I know that you died for me and I just want to have a relationship with you. If that's you, I mean, again, we've got these Cultivate cards. What I challenge you to do is just write on one of these cards on any one of the chairs, just click that. You know what? I need Jesus. I need salvation. I need rededication. We will pray for you. We will reach out. We will contact you. We will say, hey, what's up? How can we support you in that? Because that's the greatest conversation ever. You can't just say, I'm going to follow Jesus and go home and not tell anybody. I'm making it easy. I'm not even making you raise your hand. Just click a dumb box and I'll talk to you later, right? That's all I'm asking you to do. And then we'll have the conversation. Maybe what we need is rest, peace. We're playing the game and it's tiring. Jesus, bring peace. I'm going to let God speak as we sing this song.